Hey there, I'm Tracy Spear, speaker, author, co-founder of Exceptional Leaders Lab, and your host of Shift Out Loud. This week will be something new for me as a host, as our podcast features a husband-wife team that is crushing it in their respective careers. And they have some really interesting shifts that involve puppets, Michelle Obama, a new Netflix special, and Waffles. I know you want to know more about that, so let's get to it. My guests this week are Cassie and David Bizzaro. Let me tell you a little bit about each of them. Cassie Bizzaro was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Fantastic. She's a film graduate from the University of Oklahoma and spent almost 10 years living and working in New York City. She's worked for 15 years in higher education marketing and communications and is currently the director of communications at the NYU Stern School of Business. In 2021, she and her husband moved back to Tulsa via the Tulsa Remote Program, which I can't wait to ask you about that. They have a 5-month-old baby named Benny. She loves good emails, organizing, and kind people with big dreams. That might be the best tee up for someone I've had yet, Cassie. I also want to introduce David Bizzaro. He's a first-generation American Latinx actor and an Emmy award-winning puppeteer. His greatest joy is making people laugh, no matter the situation. Directly from his website, and this is what he said, I feel so fortunate to be a professional funny man for culture-defining companies such as the Muppets, Sesame Street, the Jim Henson Company, SYFY, and the Flaming Lips. I love that. He currently has a new show on Netflix called Waffles and Mochi's Restaurant. Oh my gosh. All right, you two, come on in here. Welcome this week's guest, Cassie and David Bizzaro.
Hey, thank you for having us. This is really exciting. Yeah, we love your show.
Thank you. I've been super excited to meet you because, as you know, I'm talking to a lot of people with a lot of different shifts. And when someone's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I get extra excited living here too. But so I want to just kind of let you guide this. First of all, I always ask people where they're sitting. You all, so they cannot see you, that you are sitting together in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yes.
We are. Yeah,
That's right. And we are surrounded by puppets, characters, if you will,
I think we
sharp
will.
objects.
Lots of sharp objects. We're sitting in my studio right now, and there's about 7 puppets and
Light.
lots of sharp objects, lights, an unfinished jacket that I've been working on for a while. I taught myself how to tailor and make clothing over the pandemic, and when we were in lockdown in New York, and then yeah, I probably have cut my hands more times than I can count on my fingers.
And there's some cats in here too.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? I left them outside. So usually our cat, Robert Redford, likes to jump in my lap when I'm sitting here. So
Nice.
we're missing out on that to this morning.
You know, one of my favorite things is knowing the names that we all choose for our animals. So Robert,
Yeah.
Redford, I like it.
Yeah, Robert Redford and Celia Croon. And they
Yep.
are brother and sister and rescue cats. And
Yeah. Rescued them during a winter storm when we first moved here a year ago in February.
Now, listen, I have so many questions for you. So I don't want my enthusiasm to jump in and take you off course. But when
No.
you were coming on the shifting out loud, I saw the producer send me back they've had a lot of shifts. So I can't
Yep.
wait to hear. I mean, first of all, how you meet. You were in New York. What was it like in the pandemic? And now you're in Tulsa. So where do you want to start? Jump in. What's been the
Gosh.
first big shift
Oh,
for you?
wow. Maybe I guess the easiest start at the beginning, maybe?
I do feel like a big shift was moving to New York.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's been maybe things along the way that led up to that. And for me, moving to New York was always a dream. Like I said, or you said, born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And my mom was actually a costumer in the 80s in New York City, and she worked on cats and she worked on Shakespeare in the Park and some really cool things. And this was before I was born. And I grew up with the New York in the 80s stories. And I was like, wow, So when I thought of like, where can I go to really just stretch myself and get out of my comfort zone, New York was always on my mind because of my mom's experience. And so when I met David, this is long before even a date was in mind or, a relationship. When I
Yeah.
met him, I said, Yeah, I'm saving up my money to move to New York City. I don't know what you're doing, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we were in an interesting place, really. Like the part of what part of my favorite thing about how we met is that we actually lived a block from each other and didn't know it. And she had a friend Cassie was working on a documentary at the time, and she had a friend who needed some motion graphics done for it. And I was working for the Flaming Lips at the time, doing animation and motion graphics and a slew of other things. Uh, and so her friend put her in touch with me, and she went on my Vimeo, liked my video, and I was like, "Who is this person liking my videos on Vimeo?" And this is before this is the only thing that makes me feel old. It was before online dating on your phone, you know? It was before anybody was
We
swiping.
missed that trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we started talking on Facebook Messenger because I got on there and I was like, this person knows a lot of people I know. Who is this person? We're messaging for, a couple days. And I mentioned, well, hey, I run in this park. And she's like,
Yeah.
I also,
Oklahoma City, which is a huge, you know this, being from Oklahoma, but Oklahoma City is the largest city in the United States per land mass, right? So like the idea of someone being a block away from you is pretty remarkable. And we, became friends and then kind of
yeah.
there. And he was planning on moving somewhere too.
Right. Well, and I know that you're trying to tee me up to get there, but I keep wanting to tell details about the story because it makes me laugh. Cassie's doing great because Cassie's a professional communicator. And so she's done like in-person interviews. And I feel like she's trying to hit those bullet points hard. And I want to give you some gritty details because they're great and I love them. So when we were realizing we lived like a block away from each other, I said, well, it's now a moral imperative that we meet. We have to. And so I was like, let's go, as friends. I was like, I'm not dating right now. She's like, I'm not dating right now. Great. As friends, let's go have some Thai food. We'll walk there. And so I walk over. Also, I said walk there because I didn't have a car because I was poor.
But I
And
didn't know that at the time.
yeah, I mean, I was working for the Flaming Lips, but let's be honest, I was making $10 an hour. I wasn't making a lot of money. And so I walk over there and Cassie comes out wearing like a trench coat, a hoodie. She's got no makeup on, baggy pants. Yeah. And what is your explanation of why you dress that way?
I didn't want to date anyone. And so I was trying to put that vibe out there. Like, I
Mission
think
accomplished.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
don't look at me like that. I
yeah.
wanted to kind of look mannish. And I thought, he seems like he's into women and that would, turn him off. But you know what? Look at us now.
It,
Oh my God.
I want to surprise the listeners real quick because you may not realize it, but it didn't work at all. It didn't work. I saw right through it, and Cassie's, amazing personality shined right through. And I realized this is somebody I need to get to know better and understand. And so we made this was our first like our whole relationship has been founded on really healthy, good, open communication. And this was the first time we set boundaries with each other. We weren't even in a relationship. We both agreed, okay, we're not dating. We can't hold hands. We can't go on a date. We can't touch each other. No intimacy. But we're allowed to watch Netflix together through our Xboxes from each other's houses. And we're going to watch X-Files. And that's what we did. And that's how we started.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you fall in love over X-Files? I love this.
We did. Yeah. We rewatched. Yeah.
It's like kind of a ritual.
Yeah.
Where we start the whole series over.
Yeah. We
How far we get.
we stop once. What's the male actor's name? I forget his name.
Older.
Mulder. But once Mulder stops being in the show, we're like, all right, we're done.
Yeah.
And we kind of like go
That
away.
happened.
The Terminator joins in and we're kind of like, okay, we're done with the series.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Anyhow.
So I have a lot of follow-up questions that my audience may or may not want to know, but when do you start holding hands? That's really what I want to know. When do you
Actually, so shortly, it was about 6 months in. So that was like my goal. I had given myself this arbitrary date where I was, because I had gotten out of a kind of painful relationship, and I was like, you know what, something's not working, and I need to stop. I'm a serial monogamist. I like a person. I go in hard and deep, and then I hitch my self to that wagon, and then it's so painful getting out of it. So I need to like.
I recently learned that there's a term for that. One of the terms I've learned is U-hauling, where you very quickly move in with somebody because you're like, "Ooh, I like you." You just move in immediately, which I love.
The real term is being a lesbian. That's what that really is.
You know what that means? It's called being a lesbian. All right, that's what it is.
I love that.
My TikTok sends me everything and everything these days, and I just heard like, yeah, we started U-hauling. I was like, I like that. That's funny.
So I wanted to stop that behavior in myself. So point being, as I had said, you know what, I'm not dating or like David said, no kissing, holding hands, all these things for 6 months. And so I actually was training for it as an Oklahoma City marathon, the one and only marathon I've ever run, but I did it. And he came and cheered me on, and we had known each other
In the rain, freezing rain.
like we had not known each other for very long. And I was smitten. And so we held hands not long after that. But I had kind of hit my goal. And also he cheered me on. And there was like a tornado warning that year. I mean, this was a wild year to run a marathon. And he was out there. And so I was
Yeah,
like, well, this guy, there's something about him.
Got potential. He's got potential.
I got potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now listen, when we have a glass of wine together, which we will for sure, we'll unpack more of that. Let's get me to New York City. So you guys
Yeah.
No, we did it. So we were both kind of in agreement, New York City. Like I had already, decided. David was kind of deciding on a few places he might live. And I think, I tipped the scale, so to speak. And
Yeah.
we were both saving up our money. And I was working at OU at the time, and I was applying for jobs. And just to kind of flash forward, I was able to get a job offer before moving out there. So that was a huge deal and kind of
nice.
rare. And so I started working at NYU, and we move out there, and wow, talk about a totally different world. At first, like just thinking about how do you find a house, a home, an apartment, and it's night and day, right?
It's
Like
grueling.
it's grueling. It's like
It's worse than finding a home,
yeah,
to be honest.
yeah. You have to make like 40 times at the time. It was like 40 times your salary. So you have to prove that. You have to, and if you can't, you got to get a guarantor. And it was
Yeah.
just insane and just trying to navigate that. And really, I'd only visited New York City once before I moved there. And David, a couple
I'd
of
been
times.
there a couple times just
Yeah.
through working in the indie music scene. I'd been there a couple times. Yeah.
where
So
did you-
what's
Where
that?
where did you move? What part of the city did you
So
move into?
So we kind of we were really open-minded to anywhere. The place that we felt the most drawn to was Manhattan. Everybody was moving to Williamsburg, and we were just like, we don't want to just go to Williamsburg. We want to experience New York City. And because it's two very different worlds. Even where you move in Brooklyn is completely different to itself.
City, yeah.
Even in the city, yeah. So we ended up
landed-
landing. Yeah, thank you.
Watch
Cassie's trying to hit those bullet points.
He's doing
We
great.
landed. She's doing great. Yeah, we landed in Washington Heights, is where we ultimately found.
Yeah, we could
our
afford it. It was beautiful. And also, fun fact, not in a flood zone, because Sandy had happened not that long before we moved. I think it had been a couple of years. And so that was important to me. It was like, well, how does that look? And so it's the highest point of the island. And you really, like from our window, we could look down Manhattan, the island, and see the Empire State Building, right?
Nice.
So I mean, it was tiny, but still it was amazing. It was beautiful. We lived there for a long time.
like
And
7
then
years, something like that.
we moved. We ended up winning the housing lottery in New York City, which is a real thing. And no, it's not free housing, but it's deeply discounted housing. And we ended
Yeah.
up moving to Williamsburg. So even though we were judgy about it at the beginning, it circled back.
Williamsburg ended up like saving our ass. Our apartment in Washington Heights, the window got kicked in by a neighbor who was having a mental breakdown and was mentally distressed. And overnight, we just found out we won this housing lottery, which is run through the affordable housing in New York. And over the weekend, moved to Williamsburg,
Like,
packed up all of our
it
stuff,
was
and moved.
wild.
Yeah.
It was wild. Just one of those moments, and they exist in life, whether you live in the Midwest or in a big city, but just like your life can change in a flash. And that was definitely one of those moments. So we've had both experiences of living in New York in a the Brooklyn borough and Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that, like, since this is all about shifting, one of the things that drew me to you, Cassie, was, and we've talked about this before, is your uh your survival instincts are similar to mine. So like you mentioned, first generation American, my mom moved here from El Salvador during a civil war. And I was taught by her just like how to survive. And my life has been full of shifting, constantly shifting from different lifestyles to different families, different neighborhoods, different states. And so when Cassie and I got together, I very early sensed that in her, like her ability to do what needs to be done in the moment instead of just like, because we could have done what a lot of people do in New York when that happens that are not native to New York, just pack up and go home,
Yeah.
just pack up and go back to Oklahoma.
Like it's time.
Yeah. But instead,
We're under
we
it's
were
time.
we were looking at apartments before we got the offer for the lottery, and we both were just like, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna survive. We don't want to go back to Oklahoma right now. We're not ready for that. We're gonna figure this out. And so that's why, as a unit, you and I together, we understand what each other's strengths are in the moments where we do have to shift. And so Cassie was like, all right, I am logistics. David, you are action in the moment. And we go and we attack it, and things can get done between us both extremely quickly.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the spreadsheet. He's the formula in the spreadsheet.
I am. Yeah.
Oh my God, there's the headline for the podcast. Listen, I love that. And you're right. A lot of people, your window gets kicked in. You're like, oh my gosh, this is a sign where, we wanted to go home. You were out of here and you don't, you stay. And in staying, you get to spend the pandemic in New York. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, because I've talked to people that lived in New York. As somebody that watched it, it looked kind of like, wow, everybody's rallying together, yet it was so traumatic. I know for people that went through that. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was just out there and connecting with some folks who I hadn't seen in a while. And, everyone who experienced the pandemic hitting the United States in New York City, we're all dealing with trauma. Like, we're still all trying to figure out, like, what that experience meant. How are we going to heal ourselves through it? And some people had horrendous experiences. I'm thinking in particular, there was a guy in the news that we saw who was one of the workers loading bodies onto the semi trucks out there,
Ugh.
that they were, the improvised morgues. And he was loading it one day, and he realized, he was looking at the name on the tag because he has to catalog it. You remember this? He realized it was like his friend. It was like his neighbor. And he was just like, oh my God, like he had been working so much and so hard that he wasn't able to check in with his block, his neighborhood.
And even grieve that
Mhm.
that death. And I feel like, to paint a picture, it was terrifying, like everyone was experiencing. And then on another level, you feel trapped. We don't have a car. Most people in the city didn't and don't. And for good reason. You have an amazing public transportation system. But if you don't have the means to get out of the city to flee, as many people did, they're going to their second homes, wherever they
Yeah,
might
we
be.
saw people in U-Hauls, like literally people looking like they were running from what is it, like Escape from New York, like an apocalyptic film, like
Yeah.
people throwing shit in their U-Hauls and just speeding down the street.
And so you had some really beautiful moments of coming together. And some of the things that I still remember that touched me and will stay with me forever is seeing the Empire State Building blinking a red light. It was to a heartbeat to remind us all that we are still alive. I mean, it just gives me goosebumps just
Yeah.
thinking about it. And we would see that from our window, right? It's just this sign, this symbol that like we're still here. And every day at 7 o'clock, everyone would open up their windows or go out in the streets and bang pots and pans and clap and cheer for a solid minute for the first responders, for the frontline workers, for the Amazon delivery and the US,
Yeah.
everyone who still had to be out there. Um, and then also like one thing that really was personal for us and going through that pandemic experience that I think was unique, but also actually, and talking with some of my friends, they had similar experiences, which is tragic. But we had found out that we were pregnant actually in January of that year. And a week into the pandemic, um, I had a miscarriage. And this was at like 3 months. So this we had just told our family and we
Yep.
decided
Just
to
told our
tell them
friend.
because we were in the pandemic and everyone was scared. And we were like, you know what, if we tell them, because it was like literally our 3 months was coming up that week, we tell them it's something to look forward to. This is happy news. Like,
It's a safe time to tell people.
yeah, right.
At least we're told.
Right.
It's a safe time to tell people.
And so we celebrate that with them, and then literally like days later, I
The next day, like
yeah.
the next, it wasn't day. Like that's what's so crazy to me is it was the very next day, that next day at night,
Yeah,
11 p.m.
and we knew what was happening, and we knew it could happen. I mean, we were this was our first, pregnancy, and we were very, eyes wide open. I know miscarriages are very common, and it's important for like women to normalize that. I had heard that they happen. What I didn't hear, what wasn't normalized, and which was a big shift for me as a woman in my own body and experiencing things I'd never heard of, was if you don't have the medical care, like if you're not going to the hospital, what does that look like? Like, what does a quote unquote natural or unmedicated miscarriage look like? Because that's not typical. And actually, with everything going on in our country around Roe v. Wade, this, has come up.
It might become more typical.
Yeah.
Yeah. More
But it was,
standard.
just to share a tiny bit, because I think it's important to normalize that, is like David and I, for 3 days straight, he was with me from like, it was the cramping, the pain, and really what was, and now that I've had a baby, I know what it was labor. I was going through contraction.
And we were told afterwards too that the contractions, a miscarriage at that stage, the contractions can be indistinguishable from labor, like when you're actually giving birth to a full-term kid.
And it was the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. I was not prepared for it. Obviously, like had zero training, right? To go through this experience. And I was not going to go to the hospital. Every headline and everything about what was going on in the pandemic was like, do not go there. Like, you should have, unless you chop off your arm or you have COVID, right? You do not go there. If you go into that hospital, you will get COVID. And I just couldn't do it. And my doctor was like, sounds like you need to go to the hospital. I'd advise you to go to the hospital.
Was 3 a.m.
Hey.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but like it was 3 a.m. on the first night. And neither of us were prepared intellectually. Like we hadn't been educated on how to navigate this situation. And so I'm on the phone calling our OB and saying like, hey, here's what's going on. It's like, yes, you're having a miscarriage. You need to go to the ER immediately. And I said, well, I hate to remind you, but it's the pandemic and we can't go there. We just wouldn't work. She said, okay, well, if you don't go, your only choice is to stay home. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? And she said, you stay home. I said, no. What do I do? Like me as the partner, what do I do to make sure that my wife doesn't die while this is happening? And she said, just keep track of her and like watch her and, check her temperature. And I said, okay. And that was it. That's all she gave me. And so I ended up, while Cassie's like taking a break in between contractions, I'm Googling what to do. Sure. And this, I'm sorry, listeners, I'm not going to get too graphic, but I'm sorry, listeners, if this isn't great, because I feel that if anyone's out there listening right now and your partner is pregnant, you need to know this, is that if your partner is having a miscarriage and it's a later term miscarriage, you have to check their temperature, and their temperature, it's okay if it's 101. That's normal for someone giving birth or having contractions. If it goes above that, that's when you should start consulting your doctor. Part 2, you have to pay attention to the smell, because if the smell does start to change and starts to I forget the exact smell, of course, listeners, Google it, but you need to pay attention to it because that can also be an indicator of an infection. And so you pay attention to that. And you have to time these, because if they start getting to a place where they're happening a lot and the bleeding doesn't stop and the temperature goes up really high, again, could be an infection. And so as a partner, you really cannot, if you're staying at home, you really cannot just sit by the sidelines and hope that your partner just like passes it okay. Like most TV shows, this is my
Right.
biggest beef.
Right.
Most TV shows show that just, oh, a woman just like went to the bathroom and oh, she had her period and now she's back to dinner and she's fine. No, 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 that's not what happened.
Yeah.
You literally get hit by a baseball bat in your stomach and you're
Right.
down.
And so, yeah, that was the
Sorry,
beginning.
I get passionate about that.
And that was the beginning of the pandemic, and that, it changed us, and it also made us think, okay, what what our lives look like, and we want to have a kid, right? We want to have a family, but I didn't feel like I could see that in New York City, and that kind of is what drew us to thinking about leaving at a certain point, about a year into the pandemic. And that's kind of where, the Tulsa remote program got on our radar.
Yeah, because we were weighing out the pandemic and politics and just weren't sure that being away from my mother who has breathing issues, who lives here in Oklahoma, would be a good idea for us. And so we started looking at options of what we can do and how we can do it. And my friend, I think it was Tracy Zeke, actually, she's an awesome human being who lives here in Oklahoma. She was like, you should check out the Tulsa remote program. And I think it might be perfect for you both.
Oh my gosh. I want to just take a breath and say, thank you for sharing that. That was very intimate. And I felt every word you both said, and I'm very sorry. So there's that. And to imagine everything you're going through. I don't know. I'm stuck on the fact that you couldn't just go to the hospital. You couldn't, 3 days. I just can't wrap my mind as a woman. I cannot wrap my mind around that. And like you, I'm not going to go deep, listeners. Hang on. This will turn fun and funny in a minute, but I want to stay here for a second and say what's happening with Roe v. Wade and all the stuff, like some of the consequential things that are going to happen. So I just needed to pause and look at you and say, I hear you and I see you, and thank you for sharing that for both of you. So,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
course. And I know Benny, we'll talk about Benny soon. But you're there, you make the decision. And for their listeners, Tulsa Remote is this program that will pay you $10,000, which is it's to bring wicked smart people back to our city.
So wicked
Yeah.
smart.
Well, and like in some cases, I think when it first rolled out, and I remember just the excitement, enthusiasm, and the idea that our city is saying, let's be a city that, specializes in technology and remote workers. And that's before the pandemic even starts. So I always think, wow, that was fortuitous. And then I have met, like you, some amazing people that just didn't want to live in a super conservative city that went to the East Coast or the West Coast, but said, gosh, quality of life is incredibly important to me and amazing and family and all that. And that they wanted to come back, but needed a reason. And so the $10,000 I know kind of goes, okay, that kind of throws me over. I'm willing to go back. But when you think about coming back here, what were the big reasons you wanted to come home? Was it all because it couldn't have just been for $10,000? Well, it
Oh
was.
yeah, no. Yeah, we had made the decision before we heard about the program. For me, it was it was realizing that I needed to be close to my mother, you know? She, like I said, she was born with lungs that are smaller than they should be, and she has issues breathing, and I knew that if she got COVID, it could be, life-threatening for her,
Sure.
incredibly life-threatening, and I would feel so horrible if I was in New York City while she's in the hospital, because I knew that that meant I couldn't see her at all, and so I felt strongly about that, and, wasn't, of course, putting that on Cassie saying like, we have to do this or else. But when I was, when Cassie and I were in the discussion about it, that was my big thing.
Awesome. So I'll just say to the listeners listening in, we have had microphone issues. However, they are now solved, and the quality of this we'll pick up. But let's go back to where we were,
Yes.
wherever that was. So you were talking, I know your mom coming back and coming back to Tulsa. So Cassie, pick it up from there. So you want to come back, quality of life, bring your, raise your family here, and the
Yes.
different Tulsa, right?
Absolutely different Tulsa, and it just had been, you could tell that the people and frankly a lot of philanthropic people had invested some pretty monumental, investments into the city, and I was beginning to see the benefits of that on like a large scale, and it excited me because I've always felt like I would move away and go to New York and I would come back. That's always been important to me. And I would come back because there were other me's here, right? Other people who had, maybe not the means to dream big or go big, but they were dreaming big. And I wanted to be a part of helping people know that there's a lot of possibility and opportunity out there. It's just sometimes you need someone to kind of help direct you towards that. And I also was excited to be back in a state, which is going to sound crazy, as someone who maybe votes, maybe on the surface you'd say, oh, she's a liberal. Being in New York City, I was around a lot of people who were just like me, which felt great because I had been in an environment that was the opposite of that for so long. So that was really wonderful. So I don't want to underplay that or devalue it. It was great. But I love debate and dialogue and conversation. And there is no place that you can have that like Oklahoma, and where people can listen to each other. I mean, I'm making, some sweeping generalizations, but I still see it. There are people that aren't, they plug in their ears and they go la la la. But I've found more often than not, people are okay and more than happy to have a conversation about issues. It may not mean that you change their mind, and that's not the point. But I wanted to be in a city and in a state where I could make maybe a deeper impact, and I could take some of the ideas and the experiences that I've had and opportunities that I've had in my lifetime and pay them forward.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with you. As you know, oftentimes I'm standing on a stage and, they introduce me from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there's definitely a bias when you hear Oklahoma. And then people are always like, really? That's going on in Tulsa? Okay, well, it's so much more progressive than people think. And I think you two are an amazing addition back to Tulsa. So you've been back for a year now, is that right?
Yeah.
Roughly?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a blur, but maybe closer to 2 at this point. But yeah,
Yeah. It's almost
like a year and a half.
2 in February of next year. Yeah. It'll be a year, or no, 2 years. Yeah. It's been a
All
while.
right. So let's make a little bit talk about this shift and I teed it up, Michelle Obama and Waffles and Netflix. Come on, tell us more about that. So kind of what's the transition shift there? Because that happened, did that start in New York?
That started in Oklahoma. Waffles and Mochi didn't start in Oklahoma. My career in puppetry started in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I was, I was an actor when I was a young person, and was really discouraged because I, you know, I do have a very wonderful Salvadoran heritage, but I'm also aware that I don't look like what people think of when they think like when people say like a Hispanic or a Latino. Like, I'm not the image of that. And so trying to get a parts as an actor was really difficult, because I would go in for the Latino and be like, oh yeah, no, you're, not what we're looking for. And what they really meant was like, we're looking for someone who's Mexican, like that stereotypical guy who works at a taco, truck Mexican person that most Americans think of. And if I would say, okay, I'll go in for a European American character, and I'd go in for that, and they'd be like, no, sorry, you're too brown, you're too Latino,
Ethnic looking.
yeah, you're too ethnic looking would be the thing. And so I got really discouraged and started working in production, because I do love TV and I love film. And that's what led me to working with the Flaming Lips. I was doing backing videos, music videos, documentaries, toys, all sorts of things for them. After that, I started working in advertising and was a animation art director doing visual effects, motion graphics, animation. And when we were going to move to New York, I thought I'd be going into visual effects. That was my goal. And I had been looking at agencies out there. But in between that time, I had been curious about doing a project with puppets. And I needed a job. So I reached out to a potential client and said, hey, you should have a commercial with puppets in it. And I sent them a video with puppets in it. And they were like, this is gorgeous. We love your concept. Can you really do puppets like this? And I lied and said, 100%. Of course I can. I can. It'll be great. You'll love it. And so in a week, I had to learn how to build puppets, write a script for puppets, direct them, perform them, and shoot them. So we did it. We released it. And I found a huge joy and love in playing these characters because they could be anything I wanted them to be. They didn't have to be, just a human character. They could be, a sheep who loves to tell puns. It could be anything. So from there, when Cassie was talking about moving to New York in our early days, I was like, okay, well, this might be perfect for me because I can potentially work in motion graphics, but I can also explore this thing, which is puppetry. So we moved to New York and I just start getting my feelers out there and start meeting people. I go to what's called the New York Puppetry Guild. The full name is the Puppetry Guild of Greater New York. Pagogny is what they call them. I was vice president and was definitely trying to get them to rebrand, but no one listened to me. And so while I was there, of course, the Henson Company is part of their studio is based in New York, and they have a rich heritage in New York City. Sesame Street's there. There's also a lot of really brilliant theater puppetry that's there. So I was immediately plugged into a really great puppetry community. And I found mentors early on, was learning it, and my love for this art form just kind of grew and grew and grew. And particularly this Muppet style puppetry. That's the kind of puppetry I do, which is meant just for TV and film. And yeah, sorry, I suddenly got distracted because I was reliving a moment of being in Alphabet City playing with puppets with friends. But yeah, I really grew. And there was a moment when I said to Cassie, I think that I want to do this full time and I'll go freelance as a motion graphic artist. But I'm going to more seriously pursue being a puppeteer and a puppet builder.
Okay, just for a moment.
So that was the shift.
How does that land with you? You tell me what you're thinking.
Right.
When that's his. Hey, I figured it out.
Yeah, from going from a 6-figure salary and pretty sweet job in an ad agency to
and working remotely. By the way.
Working remote and getting promotions.
Like climbing the ladder in advertising and doing really well, and then saying, "Hey, how about a job that's like maybe 30,000 a year, maybe?"
Yeah, that's like it's a good year. But yeah, I've always believed in David. That was why I dated him. That's why I married him. He's incredibly talented, and I think we both appreciate that in each other. Our creativity. I have 100% confidence that he is gonna do it, that he's gonna make it. He's not just someone who's like, oh, I want to be an artist and I want to, explore this thing. And then he's playing video games on the couch or something. No, that's not David. I knew he would use the time, and that's exactly what he did. He was able to have the space to accelerate his career, right? So he is so far along. And we've talked about this because he has other friends who are very, very talented that aren't getting those big name characters yet. And I think the key differentiator is David was able to do this full time. He was able to take classes. He was able to, email important people on important productions and say, hey, can I shadow you? Right. Like he had all this flexibility because he wasn't having to work in a restaurant and like
Well,
squeak by paying the bills
that's
because I
because of
had,
you. Yeah.
yeah, because I had the stable job, right? Like I was the breadwinner, so to
Yeah.
speak, which I hate that term, but we talked about it, right? It was just like, okay, let's try it. And I think originally, if I'm
We made
remembering
a
correctly,
contract with each other essentially. Like
let's
we
try this for 6 months.
yeah.
And then if 6 months goes okay and we're doing okay, because that was the other thing. You can always go back.
That's right.
Right.
You can always say, oh, you know what? It's not working, or we do really need extra income. And you can always go get a job. And so that
And
kind
work
of,
at a cafe or a restaurant. You know, there's
yeah.
tons of cafes and restaurants in New York.
But
And
listen, I love that about you saying that. And generationally, I'm from a generation that is, you get the job and you stay in the job and you don't leave the job. And I look back at all of those little open doors. I was like, nope, I got a job. I'm staying here. Nope. So I love that listening to you say, you get another job, like go try it. And that you have a partner in this thing that you're like 6 months. And I know a lot of people say, oh, it's all luck. But no, no, no. It's where preparation meets opportunity as we
yes,
that's what luck is.
Yep.
And the fact that you're like, you know what? No, no, no. I'm not hanging on the couch. I'm at night school. I'm learning all I can. I'm making contacts. I think a lot of times people undervalue the stuff they don't see that's happening in the background, like the amount of work it takes for the three of us to be sitting here right now. And hopefully we make it look fun and easy, but it's a grind, right? Like
right.
it's a
Absolutely.
grind. So when you find a partner that gets that, I love that you all have had that experience. So he comes home and says, I'm going to be a puppeteer. And you're saying, all right, here we go. I know you'll be the
That's
best
right.
puppeteer ever. And when what happens? What is the big kind of breakthrough there?
Mm.
Yeah. So the thing that really I think started me on the right path to where I am now is my friend Liz. You know, Liz Hara was really the one that was the ultimate catalyst that got me into the Henson and Muppet world.
Because she was well trusted and well known, and his name coming out of her mouth meant something.
Yeah. So Liz Hara is an incredibly talented writer. If you Google her, you'll find that she's like crushing it writing for Marvel. She's writes for Sesame Street. She's also a super talented puppeteer. She's got a short film that she's going to be releasing soon. She's incredible. One of my closest friends, we in New York, we were meeting at least every 2 weeks, at least a month, to have breakfast because we both get up early. And so we were like, let's have breakfast and we're going to check in with each other and see where we're at on our journey and just like discuss, the things that we can't say in front of our other colleagues, right? You got to have that friend where you're like, you know what? This guy I'm working with is just an absolute idiot. And what do I do? You got to be able to have a space to say that. And she's been that person for me and I've been that for her. So one day she's like, well, how are you feeling about where you're at with puppetry? And I said, I feel like I'm hitting a point where I can't teach myself anything else. Like I'm hitting a plateau. I can't go to who my mentor at the time was Michael Schupak, and he's another guy, another Sesame guy. And I was like, I feel like I've learned what I can from him. I need to be in a shop. I need to be in a big shop that's doing big things. And it just so happened that she was transitioning out of working for the Jim Henson Company in New York as a puppet wrangler and prop builder and builder. And she said, well, and I didn't know that, but she was like, why don't I recommend you to the Henson shop? And I said, that'd be amazing.
Kind of take my space as I moved to LA.
Yeah. And she
Wow.
hadn't told them yet either. She was planning, she was like pulling,
Succession.
for lack of a better term, she was pulling the puppet strings of the situation. So she recommends me. I go and have an interview. I take my bag of puppets and I'm like, I've made this puppet and I made this puppet. I'm holding one of my silly bag puppets up in front of them. And, Oscar the Grouch is like around the corner. And I'm like, oh, I made this. And that's how I sound in interviews. Cassie's helped me sound better. I used to just talk like this.
We had some work to do.
I just didn't have a lot of confidence, But they, at the end of the interview, they were very kind. And Jason Weber one of the lead guys there at the shop was like, we don't have a place for you right now, but you're really interesting to me. You really fascinate me, is what he said. And he said, so if anything comes up, we'll let you know. And so I went away, and about a couple weeks later, Liz invited me to go to Jane Henson's house in Connecticut. So Jane Henson was Jim Henson's wife, and she had a family home in Connecticut. And whenever she wasn't using it, she would invite artists to come use her home. She'd be like, use it, like workshop a play, workshop anything you're doing.
Talk about an incredible woman.
She
and
is
a woman.
Yeah.
The girl could say, behind every great man, there's a woman. All that. I hate those horrible phrases.
I hate that phrase.
She should not be behind anyone.
No.
We need to be saying her name more,
Like,
because she was a force to be reckoned with. She's unfortunately passed, but her legacy lives on, and her home is one of those places. Her son and daughters still have invite artists out to this home as a retreat.
If it wasn't for Jane Henson, Jim Henson would not be remembered the way that he is. She started what's called the Jim Henson Foundation, and she led it and managed it. And basically what they do is they've archived all of Jim Henson's work, and even to the point of saving every single tiny little pocket notebook he ever had, or membership of any kind. She saved everything. Whereas from what I've learned hearing from others, Jim Henson was more of an impermanent guy. Like, he was like, oh, he would save stuff, but if there was a puppet, he'd rip it apart and change it. Cause he was like, no, I'm gonna, like Oscar the Grouch, the first one was orange and he didn't like it. So he ripped it apart and made him green because he wanted it to be different. But Jane would save all that stuff. And she would also propose doing museums and, keeping his legacy alive. She focused on what his brand looked like after he passed. And so I think he would still be remembered, of course. But the reason that I think that his memory is so strong is because of her. She understood the importance of what they both had created. It's just she's happier being behind the curtain than being in front of it.
That was like a little tangent.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
interesting.
And it's something that I'm glad you brought it up, because I feel really strongly about that, as do a lot of puppeteers. But so back to the story.
So you're in the house. You're in the house that Jane curated, and
Liz invited me to go up there with her and a group of folks to work on an idea for a short film. This is not her short film now. This is a different one. And I went because I had a film background. I was one of the few folks that had a production background, and I was helping them figure some things out. And the weird thing is every time I slept there, I was sleeping on a couch in her upstairs area and hanging out in my favorite spot, which is right by her record collection, which is extensive and really fun to listen to. There's first pressings from the Muppet movies and from Fraggle Rock that I would put on the record player and listen to. But I would lay on the couch there and sleep. And every now and again, it just felt like there was a presence there, like a really warm but also observant and what's the word? Sort of taking stock of who you are.
You better use this opportunity.
Yeah.
Don't lose it.
And
I stayed there once too.
Trying to figure you out. Yeah.
Feel it.
It was almost like her spirit's there to okay, what kind of person are you? Are you somebody who I want to be here? And I've been told by others that was her presence too. She's very kind and wonderful, but she also was very discerning. Yeah. And of course, look at the company she helped build. She's an incredible person. So stayed there. It was amazing. We were around family photos and her library, and I went home. And the next day, Monday morning, I go home Sunday night. Monday morning, I get woken up by a email that arrived in my mailbox at 6 in the morning. And it's from Michelle Crichton, who is the shop manager at Henson. And she says, hey, can you come in today? We really need an extra person. And this is the day after being at Jane's house for the weekend. And I emailed back, yes, of course, I will get ready now and leave. And that started my career building puppets for them and doing a job called puppet wrangling on Sesame Street.
which
That
led
gives
to your Emmy for
Sesame
50th.
Street is what led to my Emmy.
Yeah, for
On
costume design and
which the 50th, it's funny, I wasn't
Sesame Street.
originally going to work on it, I think, because I had gotten to a place where I'd worked for them for, I think, 3 years, and I was my hourly rate had grown there, and they kind of called me in as almost like a specialist in a weird way in some cases. Like, we need an extra person, call David in because he works fast and he can get things done really quickly. And they ended up having like 15 puppets they needed refurbished. And they were also having issues with the props because they weren't quite working right. And they were Jason called me up and was like, David, would you please come in? We need you. We really need you. And I could really use you on my team right now. And so I came in and was assigned a bunch of props. And then the next day they were like, hey, we have all these puppets that are like from the 1960s that have not been restored. Could you go through all of them and fix them?
Wow.
And so I had to go through every single one. There was a dog from like 1965 that its foam had completely deteriorated to the point where it was just powder. And I had to completely replace it. And did all that work, was also wrangling on those days. Which means a puppet wrangler is basically hair and makeup for a puppet. And I would go on set, and if Elmo needed a costume or if Elmo had a tear in his fur, I would fix the tear or I'd put a costume on him. And because of all that work that I'd done on that, I won an Emmy. And we won that Emmy during the pandemic.
Yeah, actually, we didn't even get to go to the dang awards because, well,
Couldn't go anywhere.
It was online. No
Yeah.
one could go anywhere. But
We were all on Zoom.
we were dressed up.
Now listen, is that Emmy in this shot? Because like, why is it not? Okay,
I know.
Come on.
It was actually in my shot originally.
What?
So there it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and you can
Congratulations.
see, I'll bring it up close.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Not neat.
Listen, I had
Listen.
chills when you said you were listening to the records, and I want to just for the audience pause for a moment and say, what happens in that moment, I believe, is it allows you to go so much deeper in the possibilities, right? Like, I think a lot of people, oh, that could never happen. That could never happen. But when you're in an immersion situation, when you're in the energy and the space that somebody that you are, connecting to in a deeper way, I do think it allows you to be a bit of a dreamer. I think you two are probably pretty big dreamers anyway.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I can imagine that doesn't make that a little bit more real. And I think that a lot of people listening don't put themselves in the situation to even have those moments or opportunities to go, if I didn't know what I knew, how big could it be? And so going through every open door, taking time to set goals, going into a place that's not your particular dwelling. So I think that that's exactly what she designed that place to be, is for you to
Yes.
go in there and look and feel the possibilities. So that now it's getting me
Yes.
goosebumps again. I love the idea of that, because you just said, oh, hell yeah, I can do this too, right? And
Mhm,
by
Yeah.
the way, no surprise there's an email then. No surprise.
Right, that's
Yeah.
probably changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you
Yeah.
win the Emmy, and which is just so fucking cool. And then what?
So at that time, hilariously, I won the Emmy, but I was also leaving puppetry. I was giving up on puppetry as I won the Emmy. And not a lot of folks know that. I think if you were to look at my Instagram, you could see and tell that something is shifting, but you
Yeah,
can't
why
really tell
David's
what.
baking a lot and he's making clothes now?
Yeah, what's happening? Like, what's going on?
He's having a crisis of self
I did.
on the Instagram.
I had lost all of my work overnight, which that's not what scared me. Like, when it comes to work and making money, I learned, like I said, I learned from my mother that it's not that you're looking for any opportunity, you're just open to whatever might come your way. And sometimes you have to sleep on a floor, and sometimes you get to sleep in the fanciest hotel in Washington, D.C. Like, that's just how life is. You don't know what's going to be thrown at you, so you have to be ready. So when the pandemic had hit and I lost all my work, I was like, okay, well, Cassie was still at her job. and was just as supportive as she's always been. And she said, well, maybe this is a time for you to just like work on your own stuff, like chill. And I said, great, I'll do that. Was creating sketches with friends, and we were all the whole like sketch comedy scene, and improvisers and actors were finding ways to create their own stuff through Zoom because it was this new medium. And while all this was happening, we have the Miscarriage, and I was vice president of the Puppetry Guild, and went through a really horrible situation with them, and which I'm not going to go into detail about, but it really hurt me deeply. And I started questioning what puppetry means for me, and if it's a space that I want to continue to be a part of. Because for me, I am a creative artist. I feel and I believe that anybody who is creative can shift that creativity into any medium. It doesn't matter. Whatever medium works for you, or you're interested in, you can pursue that and apply your knowledge from another craft onto that and master that craft. So I turned my eye towards baking first, and was baking.
Very
And
good baker, and I ate a mini a donut, and it showed.
I'm really proud of this. The very first thing I baked was a challah bread, and instead of a little three braid, I did an 8 braid, and it was gorgeous. I
Nice.
really set that bar high for myself, and continued baking. I even started an Instagram account called Bizzaro Bakes. I was like, this is what I'm doing. Nobody question it. This is what I'm doing. I was totally processing trauma, you know? And then I was like, well, I was still playing with some puppets. I made a costume for a little toilet paper roll puppet. He's sitting right back here, actually. This is the jacket I made.
Oh yeah, this little guy.
Yeah, that
I'll go
guy.
get him.
Oh, you're gonna get him. So Kaz's gonna get him. I made a jacket for this puppet, and I thought, well, if I can make a jacket for a puppet, surely I can make a jacket for myself. And I downloaded some patterns and downloaded a dress pattern for Cassie, and I made a jacket for myself, and I made a dress for Cassie. And this is the guy.
The jacket.
me-
So he was like, I like this jacket. I want this jacket. And then he
Yeah.
taught himself how to make jackets. That's how David's brain works.
Right. That's how I work. So I make this jacket, and I start teaching myself how to pattern, how to tailor. I'm downloading books, talking to tailors online, and this became my thing. And when we were going to
Not
Tulsa,
just wait, oh, sorry to
oh
interrupt
no,
you,
go
but
for
not
it.
just talking to tailors online. He reached out to what was that tiny town in England?
What?
A tiny town in England,
There's-
Mary.
There's a guy who is him and his wife have this really beautiful company called Old Town, and they
Old Town with an E.
with an E, yeah, they make custom clothing out of a small, I forget what town they live in out in Britain, and they make this beautiful kind of workwear based clothing that they've been making since like the 90s.
And so David was basically just like, hey, love you guys. Hey, I got a couple questions. Like, look at my stuff. Like, I'm doing some stuff. And anyways, it was
Yeah.
just, and he was cultivating international relationships and
Right.
in the clothes making
Which
industry.
that's exactly what I did in puppetry. Like the same thing that happened there, you know, I call it throwing a Hail Mary. Because I think that term really, I hate it for football, but I love it for like just trying to get your voice out.
Yep.
Because you sometimes just throw out stuff into the void at people and hope that maybe they come back. And I did that to Peter Linz, who is Ernie on Sesame Street,
A close friend. now.
who's now like a close friend and mentor. Yeah. And he wrote back and was like, your stuff is cool. Let's hang out. Let's get a drink. And that's what I started doing to people when I was tailoring. I was like, hey, you seem interesting and I like what you're doing. Like, let's talk.
But to keep the story
Yeah.
going,
Sorry. I'm getting wrapped.
he did still get some puppet work.
I did.
And I
Yeah.
also think, meanwhile, I'm watching this happen and I'm thinking, okay, so is this what we're doing? Are you starting a clothing brand now? Because I mean, honestly, truly, Tracy, like that's kind of that's the direction we were going. And
It was.
he was getting requests, I mean, all kinds of things.
I did one custom order.
And I was supportive, but I do recall a conversation where I said, but David, you're so freaking good at puppets. You can't just throw it away. Like that would break my heart if this situation that hurt you, and it hurt me too, in the puppetry community, made you completely throw it all away? And so I just, think about that. That's usually what I say. Just think about it, because I would miss you doing puppetry. So
Yeah.
I
So,
think
yeah,
just kind of speeding forward, but you still were getting puppetry
I
jobs,
was, yeah.
and
I did a pilot for the Sci-Fi Channel featuring a character who I built, and we shot that all from the apartment during the
yeah.
pandemic. And I built some puppets for Nickelodeon, and so I was still doing that because that was still a source of income. But I was looking seriously at starting Bizzaro clothing.
And the creator of Waffles and Mochi during all of this time reaches out to David via Instagram.
Instagram, yes.
So that's another kind of fun thing. I mean, social media can be evil too, but it also can do a lot of great things, right? It's like how you use it. And he had this, examples of his work and his brand, and they reach out to him and they're like, this is really cool. And that just started a relationship that ended up, there's, a few parts of the story we're skipping here, right? Like
Yep.
that flash forward, it seems like so easy and click your heels and it's done. But it ended up being what is now, you being Mochi on
Mochi.
season 2 of Netflix's Waffles and Mochi,
Oh my gosh.
just from an Instagram. Like they found you on Instagram.
Yeah, it started a conversation that just continued. They couldn't hire me. It just continued through for a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But most people don't realize if
Yeah.
you just, all you have to do is initiate it and put it out there. Like most people will go,
Right.
well, they won't respond, or I'm a nobody, but when you're saying that you're just kind of throwing things in play, I think that's what you have to do. And not everybody's going to respond, but the right people will. They always do. right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
1,000%. Like
That's
the
what I
people you
tell-
want to be
yeah.
surrounded by are going to find you. You'll find each other.
And that's what I tell people that, that I'm now mentoring people, which is kind of wild. And I will tell them, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, how do I get it out there? And I say what my mentors told me, like you just said, you got to get it out there.
That's right.
And the worst that someone can say or do is say no or not respond. That's the worst.
Yeah.
And
And
guess what? You're not losing a ding dang thing because they already don't know who you are. That's how I look
Exactly.
at it.
Well, because when people go, oh, I'm too embarrassed, I'm like, well, they don't even know you anyway. They don't care.
Yes.
They're not even thinking about you.
yeah,
They don't
they're
think
seeing
about
your
you.
You
work.
can only go up from there,
That's
right?
exactly
Yeah.
right. That's exactly right. Oh my God. So, but I feel like there's a little bit more. I know I've kept you a long time. but
No,
I want to.
there's a
I
lot
want to
there.
just you. Of course, I want to know about Michelle Obama. Of course, I want to know, like how does she fit in that? Is she as lovely as we all think she is? So,
She is.
just comment if you will.
Yeah. So
And can you introduce me to her? That's just an aside. But anyway, go ahead.
I wish that I could, if I could like have her over for like a really lovely, like family style meal, that would be a dream come true because meeting her is like meeting family. It's like going to a family get together and your favorite aunt happens to be there.
Nice.
And she's just like blows in for an hour and she's amazing and incredible and then leaves. Like that's who she is. She's amazing. So for the show, we shot half of the show out on the road, going to locations, and then the rest of it was our stage days. That's on set in our restaurant. And that's when Michelle Obama worked with us. And we were with her for a week, and it was awesome. She had her own area on set to sit, and in between takes when the camera wasn't rolling, she had hype music playing. And so we're there just like, yeah, this is how you work on set. In between takes, you get some hype jams going. That's what you do. And on set, when we were actually working, she came in and it didn't feel like meeting somebody who knew that they were a big deal. She just walked in and was like, hey, how's everybody doing? She's very personable and warm and kind. My favorite moment from being on set was where it's me and Eugene Cordero and Michelle and we're standing there making jokes in between the takes. And that's the fun thing about Michelle. She does love to tell jokes and like kid around. And we're all joking around. And, Eugene is a huge improviser. He's an incredible actor. And I come from an improvising background as well. So we're there just like cracking jokes with her. And Eugene and I are getting carried away. And the director's like, okay, guys, we need to like start going. And we don't hear it because we're playing. But Michelle's like, okay, guys, all right, snap it together. We both go, oh, yes, of course. And so it was like having, your aunt there to like kind of whip the kids into shape. So it was like playing with family. It was awesome.
Oh, you always love it when it's the person you think you're seeing is exactly who they are. I love you had that experience. And I remember long before I knew you two existed, seeing the Mochi and seeing her she did some kind of a promotional something on TV. And that was the first time that entered my consciousness about Mochi. Has this been like, did you think it would be this big? Do you think tell me where for you went, "Oh, golly, this is it," and were you surprised you got picked up for a second season?
So I wasn't on the first season, and
You weren't on
I
you were
I
not on
was not on the first season at
Yeah.
all. So when the first season was being put together, they had contacted me and were interested in having me build puppets and be one of the puppeteers. They weren't sure at what capacity. And the reason for that is because I have a production background and I'm a puppeteer. And so being on the road doing documentary style stuff, that's very helpful because I can communicate to the camera guy, hey, we need to change this and do it on the fly. Uh, but I was in New York, and they, at the time, were told this is before the pandemic. They were like, "Well, we have to keep the production in LA. We have to hire locals," and that's a big thing about production is that
Yeah.
that's why most people live in New York or LA. And you know this, but for the listeners, like most productions like to hire local because they don't have to pay for airfare. Through SAG, there can also be additional costs just to pay the person, and they don't want to deal with that. And so they do the easiest thing. They hire people around town because it's cheaper. So they didn't hire me, which was fine, but I kept in contact with them. I would every few months, I would say, hey, how's it going? Sometimes, the show creators would be in New York and we'd meet up, and chat. And when I didn't know there'd be a second season. And when I saw the first season, I thought it was really lovely and wonderful, but I definitely felt like there could be more to the show. And I think that's true to every first season of anything, really. You're like, ooh, this is really great, has so much potential. I can see more for this show. So when I was in LA, I was out there for the Jim Henson's diversity puppetry workshop. I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm in LA. Let's hang out. Like, just reached out.
Well,
And the showrunner was like, hey, actually, you need to have lunch with our producer because we really want to bring you in and we're not sure how, but we need to meet with you. So while I was out there doing this workshop, met with the producer and she straight up said to me, she's like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what are you focused on right now? Whatever that is, we're going to bring you on for the show to do that. And I said, I'm focusing on performing. That's where I'm at right now. And she said, okay, well, maybe you can do Mochi. You'll still have to audition, but because we need to make sure that like your voice is right and your performance is right. But if that doesn't work, maybe we can find another spot for you. And so I auditioned and they liked it. And that's what got me on the show.
what? I love that.
Yeah. And the show, you have to be fair, the show is not, Waffles and Mochi is not what brought me back to puppetry. Because I do feel like I didn't get to close that gap in the story, which is what brought me back to puppetry was doing the Jim Henson workshop and meeting somebody who I've always looked up to, which is Bill Beretta. So at my audition for the Henson workshop, afterwards and during, Kevin Clash was commenting my puppetry. And Kevin Clash played Elmo. He's the original Elmo performer. And he was like, your puppetry is so good. I can see what you're doing. And it looks easy, but it's incredibly hard. You're an amazing puppeteer. And I was blown away by that.
Wow.
And laid on the floor for like an hour afterwards and was just like beaming. I took a photograph of my puppet and wrote, Kevin Clash thinks I'm good on it. And
I was also on the floor because when he told me that, I
yeah,
was back here in Oklahoma and I was like, yeah, I was speechless. Even as a person who's not a puppeteer, knowing how big that is and also being a fan of his, I was like, I felt like I had been complimented.
you had.
You
So
were
that,
yeah,
yeah.
and those moments that are so big, I totally believe you that you're laying on the floor because what else would you do? Like you got to take it in, you got to stay
Yeah.
present. You don't want to go, oh, you want to go, Hell yes. You like those moments. I love that you both were in different cities yet
On the floor.
Yeah.
on the
Well, we
floor.
were, I was in
Right.
Oklahoma at that time.
Oh, okay.
This was,
Oh,
sorry
I
to
thought these
confuse
were
it. Yeah.
separate.
No. I did the audition here
Oh, that's right.
in this
That's right.
studio. Yeah. And that was before I
Well,
went to LA. That audition for that workshop took me out to LA. And while I was in LA, I auditioned for, I can't really say what it was, but I did a thing that I can't talk about. But what it led me to was
yeah,
this meeting. I know,
I
I can't.
know.
I
And
can't. I'm sorry.
that one you can talk about in the new year, maybe?
No. That's something else that I can't talk about.
Okay, I don't know.
These are
Oh
two
my
different things.
God. Go.
I know.
You
Yeah,
have
The
to
first
come back.
one, well, no, the first one I will never be able to talk about until I release my autobiography.
Okay.
But what that did was I got to meet Bill Beretta, and Bill Beretta performs Pepe the Prawn and a ton of characters with the Muppets. And I was sharing with him my story of how I was hurt and how I've been thinking about leaving puppetry, and I still was not certain. It's like, I don't know that this is where I belong, because I still, even though I've done this Jim Henson workshop, and Waffles and Mochi is a potential thing, I still, and to some degree, still don't feel totally welcome in the puppetry community. And he's like, and he's originally from New York. He says, fuck that. Like, you're really talented and you're really good. And and he's a very honest person. We start talking about it. And his words are really what stopped everything and said, you know what, you're right. I need to continue this. And he was like, it may never lead to the Muppets. It may never lead to Sesame Street. He said, but you're really good at this.
Yeah.
And it would be unfortunate for someone with that level of talent to not continue doing.
Listen, I love a second ago when you saw me blank out, I was trying to move a call because I didn't want it to come in the middle of your story. So I missed a little bit of that. But so I'm going to say, first of all, being incredibly present, I value that and I'm sorry for that. And thank you for retelling a bit of that. But when I think about just you're on the verge and you have somebody that pushes you back and says, no, stay the course, and reconnects you to that you're incredibly talented. I think we have to all be more mindful of not just the journey that we're on, but the presence that he has to say, I can say something right here or not, and it can change the trajectory. So and here's the best part of both of your stories. You have told a couple of stories, and there's a lot more to tell. I know that, but yet you've infused. There's just been people along the way that you're paying attention to and connecting to. You're throwing lines in the water. You're paying attention to all of the things that come from that. I think that's the real, one of the real values of the shifting piece of this. That the shifting out loud, that's the out loud part. The shift is, hey, wait a minute. First of all, let me get more connected to what I want. And the out loud is, I can't do it alone. There's other people and other signs. So, oh my gosh. So I know we have to wrap this, but before I do, I want to say this. Promise me you'll come back, just because I want to know what's going to happen after the first of the year. And the part you can't tell here, I'll ask you offline. And how can
Yes.
people listen, before I even wrap that, what's the biggest shift yet to come for both of you? What's the thing now
Oh,
that you're most excited about?
Lord.
I think, tell me if you would agree with this, but
Okay.
being new parents, we have a 5-month-old.
Benny.
And yeah, Benny, and we
Benny.
are Benny Bizzaro. He's got a name.
He's got a name and a big head, a physical size. His head is big. He will probably be a performer.
Yes. And we're adjusting like on a daily, hourly, minute basis. I feel like I'm shifting like all day, every day. And I'm getting really comfortable with that, but it's also uncomfortable at times. And that's separate than a career, right? Which is also we think a lot about and we're really intentional about. But that, yeah, the shift to having a little boy and raising a good human, another good human to go out there and do great things.
Yeah. Learning how to be it. accepting that you're angry right now and you're mad at this little person, but also projecting happiness and joy at them because you know that's what they need. But still feeling joy. So you're like, for
Lots of
me,
emotions. Yeah.
feeling anger and irritation and frustration while also feeling absolute joy and love all at the same
Yeah, it's a
time.
very weird.
And both of them being just as strong as the other.
Yes. Yeah,
Well,
if we're real about it.
listen, I can't even imagine. And 5 months, it'll be fun to talk to you again, even at 6 and 7 and 8 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gosh, well, I want to say this. I'm thrilled that you're in Tulsa. I love knowing the two of you and Benny are part of our community here. And how can people find more about you? Where can we direct them if they're interested in your show or any of the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So Waffles and Mochi's restaurant comes out October 17th. You can see a tiny little ball of mochi wiggle around the screen, and that's me. You can also go to my Instagram account and see the weird stuff that I post all the time. I've got a fun character named Jerry Fraccockle who does cat facts, and his friend Frank comes in who doesn't really care about cats and tells jokes and things. But the Instagram's just my name, just David Bizzaro, 2 Z's, 1 R.
Yeah, lots of puppet content over there.
Yeah.
And in addition to watching Netflix's Waffles and Mochi season 2, I would also say I like to write. So that's something that I enjoy doing in my all my free time as a new mom. And I have a newsletter called This, That, and the Other. And yeah, I'll give you the link. So, if people want to sign up for it, I write every couple weeks about being a parent, but also just observations on grief, because I feel like I've been put through the ringer for a purpose so that I can share that with others. I also love organizing and emails, like, we already, in my intro, we talked about. So it's a lot of just what's on my mind in all these different areas. So if you're interested in that, I'd love for people to join.
So would they find you at your, do you have a website? How would they get that newsletter?
So they can go to my Instagram account also, Cassandra Bizzaro, and you can sign up. There's a link in my profile.
So you said you love a good email. What makes a good email?
Ooh, Tracy.
You could
I
spend
love.
a whole day talking about what makes good emails with
Okay,
Cassie.
good email. Let's be okay. Short, sweet. It's got to give me something.
I just want to
Like
point
some
out real quick
personality.
to the listeners, sorry, that Cassie is now gesticulating a lot more than she has in the entire
Did
interview.
get very excited. Yeah,
I'm perked up.
She's bullet pointing each point with her fingers
I love it.
and moving her hand around as if to be giving a toast at an Italian wedding.
Okay,
go.
you're messing up the vibe here. Okay, so you've got to speak to me. Tell me what you got to give me value, not just be thinking about you as your brand, right? So it really has to be intentional, and you've got to provide value. It's like 101, but people don't think about this. They're always thinking about, what do I need to do? Oh, I have a sale, or I have a course, or I have a whatever, and I'm trying to push it on you. You're coming into my inbox right now, right? Like, I'm giving you something I can never get back with it, which is my attention, my time on this earth. You better make it worthwhile. And emails can be so fun. I have a tag in my inbox called good emails. And when I get something that like tickles my, funny bone or strikes my fancy, I put it in that folder, because there are some really talented writers out there and just creative thinkers making better emails. And I am all for it.
Okay, I'm going to hire you right now. This is a straight up real offer. So at tracyspears.com, when people go there, they're asked to sign up to get this newsletter. And I sit down and write that whole newsletter. And I think I'm doing an okay job. And I know you can punch it up a bit. So can I hire you to help?
Let's do it. Let's
All right.
do it, Tracy. Let's work
Done.
together.
Done. All right. I told you I knew we would stay connected. I could tell the minute the fact that we just met, that we have not just met.
I
This,
know.
yeah.
We've been, sorry, we went over too. I hope it didn't mess up your day too much, but this was
Listen,
awesome.
I in the middle of that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to move some things around because I am not cutting this short. And we both, all three of us, found out last night it's going to happen today. And thank you
Yeah.
for reacting in the moment. That it's so rare that we could actually pull it off. So I'm thrilled. I'm not surprised. I'm cheering you both on, and I just can't wait to see what's next for all of you. So thank you so much for being on today.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Tracy. You're awesome.